A Hollywood film is doing very well at the box office. It's called Twisters, and it's getting a lot of praise from the audience and a lot of heat from the media for daring to do what so few films do today, which is not preach a message, particularly a message about climate change. Now, take for the example this article. It affects everything. Why is Hollywood so scared to tackle the climate crisis? There's a lot of problems just in the first headline. There's not a climate crisis. Climate's change. There may be some adaptation necessary, but the idea that we are going to be wiped out as a species or we're going to suffer some enormous calamity because of some changes in the climate over the next 100 years is ridiculous. The deaths by climate, whether it's you're talking about hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, everything, gone historically way down. It's because technology improves. We invent our way out of these problems. The countries that suffer the greatest deaths are the countries that are the poorest. And if we enact policies that make them even poorer by not allowing them to industrialize the way we industrialize, well, that's going to actually cause more harm to humanity. So let's take a look at this article. Even the premise of Hollywood's being scared to tackle the climate crisis is ridiculous. They mention it all the time. They made an entire movie, I think, Don't Look Up, right? It was an entire movie based on this idea of the climate crisis that was going to destroy us all. Um, and they've made tons of movies preaching all sorts of woke messaging. One of the things that's great about this movie is that it's done very well. It has destroyed early projections by double. It's going to make over $80 million or made over $80 million at the box office. And that's up from the original estimate of 40 to 55 million. And the reason I think it's been so successful is it doesn't preach that woke message. I'm When I go to a film, I like to relax. I don't like to hear a political lecture. If I want to hear a political lecture, there's obviously places for that. But when I'm watching a disaster film, I think it really takes you out of it to hear all this, all this sloganeering and politics in the middle of the film. Now, if you look at this article by The Guardian, he goes on, a long rant about why film should be message oriented. You see the director saying, Lee Isaac Chung, I don't feel like films are meant to be I don't feel like films are meant to be message oriented. And I think that is true of a lot of films, particularly political, heavy handed messaging. I mean, obviously, you take, fight against good or evil, there's romance, there's a lot of different elements of a film that could have some political implications. But for most films, particularly, the, uh, up, a film like this, where it's just a disaster film. People come to see these films because they just want a fun show of special effects and man against nature, and that's always fun. I really like disaster films. There hasn't been a good disaster film out in the '90s. There were tons of them, but not a lot recently. And he even mentions Don't Look Up, and that film was not super popular, and I think for good reason because people don't like the preaching. Now, if you look at Tomatoes, you see that this film is doing better among audience, 92% versus critics, 78%. I think a lot of that is because it didn't toe the message, and audiences really like a feel good disaster flick. They don't want this heavy handed preaching. And even CNN I saw said that you won't hear a lot about climate change, and here's why. And even CNN is willing to admit generally scientists are the least certain about the connection between tornadoes and climate change, as it's unclear how warming temperatures are changing storms themselves or the outbreaks. And I think that is the correct stance. Now they say, well, evidence is growing. From what I see of the evidence, I don't think it is growing very much. If you see from NOAA, see that the tornadoes haven't really been peaking, particularly bad tornadoes have not been peaking in recent years. I think it is true that you have had some massive increases in property damage. I think that is heavily due to the fact that property is becoming more valuable. And when a tornado destroys a home, now or in 50 years, the home's going to be worth a lot more than it was, 50, 100 years ago. There's also a lot more homes, there's a lot more people, and that also contributes to the amount of damage. So for me, I don't think the data supports this idea of global warming causing all these tornadoes that are going to kill us all or whatever. And I think from a just a moviegoer's perspective, I don't like when movies shove political ideology down my throat, particularly when it's not a movie that should be political. If it's going to be, something like The West Wing, the movie, well, of course that's a political show. But I think that going forward, the success of movies like this that are way exceeding expectations by taking an apolitical route, that's going to force Hollywood to more and more buck the trend of forcing their politics into everything we watch and see. So let me know what you guys think about this development. Are you excited to see this film? And do you think that the success of films like this are going to reduce Hollywood's push for more of this kind of woke inclusion and climate messaging and all this stuff? Or do you think they're just going to take the losses and keep going?